to the third group of speakers, actually. So you are Eduardo, right? So Eduardo Enrique Diniz, together with Edgar Kampers, no? Edgar is also here. We talk about the integral typology of digital community currencies. So the table is yours, please.
Okay. Okay, you hear me? Okay. So good morning to all of you. So I think as a newcomer to this group, I'd like to introduce myself. So I'm a professor of information technology at the business school in São Paulo, Fundação Getúlio Vargas, it's known as by FGV. And I've been working with banking technology for the last 26, 27 years. In the last 11 years, I started working with banking technology, specifically for financial inclusion. And when I started doing that, one of the first initiatives that I met was Banco Palmas, that you probably heard of. And with Banco Palmas was my first experience with community currencies, and actually it's easy to tell that in terms of Brazil, Banco Palmas was a very inspiring model for other initiatives of community currencies in the country. And since then, so this idea of community currencies has grown for me as a big topic and very important. And as I have my background with technology, I start paying more attention on the process of digitalization of community currencies. And I have followed two experiences of Banco Palmas, which I found out that was kind of even risky for the model. So then I noticed that when the adoption of a digital platform for the community currencies could be even risky for the main purpose of the currency. So this called my attention, and then I came to investigate this more closely, and I started to with my student, which is here, and Erica, is my PhD student, was also involved on this investigation. And I came to Rotterdam, Erasmus Rotterdam, to work with Professor Eric van Heck on the first idea on trying to connect what we have from the literature of digital platforms, more specifically on digital payment platforms, and the literature that we also have with about community currencies. And then we found out that they were not connected at all. And because I was in Rotterdam, I met Edgar, and he was one of the first to read one paper that we have written about this idea of creating a typology of digital community currencies. And of course, Edgar was very critical on our work, but the good thing about that is that we decided to work more on that. So what I'm going to present to you here today, it's not, despite the bold and ambitious name of integral typology, we are still having a work in progress, so we're not going to present you results of a typology, but some ideas that we are following on the path to create a typology, expecting that you can make some comments to help us to evolve on this project. So this explaining a little bit more about the motivation. So of course, it's been difficult to create typologies for community currencies because the conditions where the community currencies are being created are changing all the time. So, and of course, one of those changes is the digital situation. So, in many cases, so the availability of digital platforms are becoming attractive for some of administrators of community currencies. And of course, they are trying to adopt this. So, and we noticed that it was not that common to find this discussion in deep, in the literature that existent. So then this is called our attention. Also, the emergence of cryptocurrencies also create a new environment or new elements on this environment, on this universe of community currencies, which doesn't fit very well on what we have now in terms of typology. Then putting together with the emergence of cryptocurrencies, when the kind of movement that we have from more traditional community currencies to the digital world, so this is become some important point for us to pay more attention on that. And because of what we had seen, specifically in the case that I saw, adoptions of the digital platforms for community currencies, and in some cases I noticed how risky it is, and I found out that one interesting way to start thinking about this typology would be to create some kind of guidelines for people that are managing community currencies on how are at least the risk that they can face, the risks and opportunities that they can face when they adopt a digital platform. So this would be more or less the main motivation for our work. As I told you, when we decided to do that, we found out that the literature of community currencies largely ignores all the risks involved on the adoption of digital platforms, and in many cases they underestimate the role of the new actors that come together with the new platforms. And in many cases, these new actors has no connection at all with the main purposes of the community currencies, which is become kind of complicated, this kind of partnership. So then we saw this a couple of times, and we noticed that this discussion, it's not present in the literature. So this is one important point. And when we get to the literature of digital payment platforms, they completely ignore the word of community currencies, and specifically the big amount of research has been done through community currencies. So from my perspective, I see two different worlds that must be connected some way. So we have to, our intention is to create a path to help those two completely different perspectives from the literature to be connected. So this is an important point for us. So, and what to expect from this work at the end. So we, first of all, we would like to have this work at the end as a contribution to practitioners interested in migrate their traditional paper community currencies to the digital world. So many of them are doing that without no orientation, no guidance, or no deep discussions on what are the risks that they are facing. And on the other side, so we are also, as an academic myself, so we are also interested in develop kind of a new field of research. So from our perspective, we see that the connection of these two different worlds will create a third new one that, for the academic perspective, would bring a lot of more interesting things to be investigated. So then, to develop this typology, we started making 10 what we call key implementation issues to be considered when they are anyone is thinking about developing a digital platform for community currencies. So I'm not going to get too deep in all of those items, so it have it in the paper. Some of them are very well known by you, but so for example, I can go to some of them that are very specific, like architecture, for example. So in the architecture, it's related to the level of the openness of the digital platform, and we can see that this has great influence on the way the community course could be developed. It depends on the way the platform is open or not, or what's the level of openness that it has. Another issue is virtuality, which is something that we also are developing better, but it's the idea that what's the effect of a community currency when we are not doing a transaction on person to person. So how does impact the community sense that is created in the process of being personally connected when you're using a payment form? So through the digital platform, you can do that virtually. So what's the impact? There's, of course, good part of it, but there's also a risky part of that. So those, I would like to talk a little bit just about those two. The other one are more conventional, but we still working on that. So our next steps will be first to go deeper on those 10 key issues. They could be grow to 12, or we can mix some of them and say it could be less than that. But the idea is for us, we are now in the process of getting more in detail all of those key issues and how to classify them. And then after that, we're going to make a selection of currencies to be tested in our model. Of course, the platform that you just presented will be a very important source for us in terms of information. We have to consider how many currencies we're going to take. So from the beginning, we are considering to take at least 50, because otherwise we think that those key issues wouldn't be very sensitive. So at least 50, but it could be more than that. It will depend on the information that we can get from each currency. That one thing that we noticed. So in many cases, the people, they don't inform clearly, even if they have a digital platform, they don't inform clearly what's the aspects of the digital platform. So this is something that we need to investigate more. And after that, as we have the issues, the key issues defined in all the currencies, so imagine a big table. So then we're going to go and to investigate using different statistic methods to understand which groups we can see from all of this. And from those groups, then we're going to make analysis from each one and to understand better what would be what we're calling the affordances and barriers for those platforms to grow. And we intend that this discussion on affordances and barriers would help to create some guidances to people that are interested in implement digital platforms for their social currencies that they already have, or either if they're trying to create a new one, so they could have some kind of information on how to rely on, how to create a strategy to make the implementation of these platforms. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Eduardo, for not being quite short, and we have more time for discussion, question and answers. So, who has a question? Raise your hand if you have some questions, comments. Nobody?
There's one question.
Where? Okay. Yes,
Hi, my name is Gilson Schwartz. I'm from São Paulo. We are friends, so we will, of course, discuss this at home better. But I just want to ask about more contextual criteria for classifying or for building up the types, like what kind of political alliances, what kind of sponsorship, relationships to private, especially private agents and private companies. For instance, in the Banco Palmas experience, we've seen over time that it started as a real grassroots, bottom-up initiative, and then gradually it was captured in a way by public agencies or even state banks or private banks interested in this emerging communities. So what about in the implementation issues, this more contextual and political economy dimension of building up currencies?
Thank you, Gilson. I agree with you. This is a very important issue to pay attention of. But from our perspective, those institutional relationships would be also seen when you discuss the objectives, the business model, and also the transactionality, meaning that transactionality means so what kind of transactions are allowed, so then can understand what kind of actors are involved in the process. Even if you think in terms of institutional support, for example, on business models, we can capture this information too. I think we probably, it's not complete, as this work is not finished yet, so probably you can change something, but I understand that we can capture this issues that you are concerned and those three key implementation issues.
And I'd like to add something to it. We as COIN, we are not a research institution, but we are still co-writing in this article, and the main reason is because we want to improve the impact of the currencies that we have. We see thousands and thousands of initiatives, but we also see that most of them are very limited in scope. They do not reach that much, although they have a lot of ideals. A lot of people put in a lot of voluntary time, and it's basically ending quite often without having any success. And we like really to change that and see if we can come up with guiding type of ideas in how to improve this, and how you can both the grassroots systems or the ones that are more institutionalized or the more commercial ones, how you can make them more effective in many ways. So that is the big thing. So it may take some time before this one is finished, because we know it's typical, it's a big thing. It's large, it's big. And it would be nice if a lot of you start to add information to that, because especially this database, we say 50, but it would be much nicer if it's more than 100 or more than 200. But it means that we need to have detailed information on these systems, and we need to have detailed discussion on what the criteria sets are. This is just the 10 where we start with, and we know we are not finished there.
What do we do? How do we participate and contribute?
I already suggested to Stephen to use his database as a starting point and see if we can add some elements there, and if we then can personally maybe interview people and make sure that we fill it, and that we use, for example, students or scientists that fill the whole database, so we know it's correct, and that we are able to put it in the right group. And if you do that, we would have a future for the database, and we would have the data that we need, which we can put in our software programs and start to analyze it, but also we can make it available for others, because I think many researchers are interested in this type of information. Especially if we bridge, say, Bitcoin, commercial world, public world, and grassroots. That would really be an interesting thing.
That's a question I'd like to ask all of you. Can you give me a show of hands if you're very interested in the connection between... Scott, I haven't asked the question yet. The connection between these emerging digital cryptographic currencies like Bitcoin and what we've been doing in the complementary currency sector or social currency sector. Are you personally finding it interesting? And if you are, could you raise your hand? I'd like to get an idea. Well, for a long time, I felt a bit alone. I moved over to the cryptocurrency sector about 3 years ago and dived headlong into it, and I've been very active in the Bitcoin and Ethereum communities, as well as with developers of other platforms like NXT, NEM, and others. And they do have almost they have very little concern about complementary or social currencies. But I invite you to come to Jem Bendel and Matthew Slater's talk on Thursday at 6 o'clock about thwarting an Uber future for social currencies, where we're raising the concern that venture capital-driven cryptocurrency development could, in a way, create a tsunami that completely wipes out the grassroots or the efforts that we've been doing to create social and complementary currencies over these last 30, 40 years. And it's really important that we learn how to communicate what we've been doing well enough so that they understand how their use cases can be improved by incorporating what we know. And we can only do that if we really educate ourselves on how cryptocurrencies work as well too from the technological side. So I find your talk very interesting. Jem Bendel and Matthew Slater, myself and others, and Scott are really looking at this, and I really encourage you to do that as well.
Hello. I'm not sure my question will be very relevant, but I'm wondering... Oh, sorry. When you are talking about digital platform payment, are you talking also about like mobile payment, like M-Pesa in Kenya, or even in Denmark they have something with mobile pay? And can we like include this type of payment as like the impact of this, and to link to the effect of community currency? Because it's more private and it's just a mean of payment, but still this mean of payment can create new flows, economic flows, and I don't know if you make the link also.
I'm not sure if I understood clearly your question, but you mentioned mobile payment, of course, so cards, electronic cards, or whatever other kind of digital platform. So that's one thing that we want to understand. So that's why we included some in those key implementation issues, some questions strictly related to the adoption of digital platforms like architecture, for example. So which is not common from the discussion on, the usual discussion on community currencies literature. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but the idea is that to include all different formats of digital platforms that could be adopted by a community currency. So and then the idea for us is to understand how those platforms can fit the ideas that are connected to the main purpose of the currency, or can be risky, for example, for a specific, as I told you, from my experience following two cases of digitalization of community currencies in Brazil, I noticed that would be risky, probably the main perspective of, for example, you can come with an idea, a main purpose for a community currency, but when you have to have partners that don't have the same vision that you have, because those partners bring the technology, bring the digital technology. And so they can actually drive what they want from the community currency, and the main purpose of the community currencies could be lost in the process of digitalization. This is our main concern.
Thank you. I have a speak about the same thing, no, but in Portuguese. I'm Brazilian, so okay. I have I think the problem may be not the technology, not only the digital, but the scale. No, yeah. With the sure. With the digital, we go more scale, a big scale, and this is a big problem. I think we never think about the how can I say, the size for a good money, no, for a currency money or the different kinds of. I think scale is a problem. Yeah,
you're totally right. So imagine that for a partner that is providing the technology, scale is something very important. And maybe this is not the most important thing for the ones that are trying to develop the community currency. So have to a kind of clash of goals when you have this. So this is for sure a problem. But you can also think about things like, for example, you can create no, just for us to recall the first presentation on time schemes. I'm not going to use the word time banking. The time schemes, they could be done through a spreadsheet. But what happens if you do a spreadsheet controlled by Google, on Google Docs, for example, so then Google can have control of this information? That's the point. So scale, of course, is one very important point for the perspective of the digital partner, but it's not the only one. So even for a small scale, the digital can represent some risk for the purpose of the currency.
So, last question, please.
I'm sorry I missed the beginning of your presentations because I got stuck in the other room. One thing that troubled me right from the beginning with in England, in the UK, we call them LETS, local exchange trading schemes, and was that it's middle class. Only certain people have got the time and the energy to do these complementary things, and then it's very precarious because when they become too friendly, they don't bother about it when they've made their connections. And the thing that's really been missing all along is people who are really poor, who could benefit. And the most interesting things I'm hearing, and it's been gradual, apparently they've been talking about it for 30 years. Professor Guy Standing has just published his book about basic income. And the general idea with the basic income is it's from the government, without question, a basic amount which relieves the pressure on they call it the precariat, the people who are working round the clock just to survive. There's no way they can take part in complementary currencies. And the only banks that are being set up in the UK, the most successful things that have been set up are food banks. Even people who are working can't afford to buy food. And I think what I'm trying to say is that you don't want to just connect with the digital currencies, you want to connect up with what's going on in government. Because unless people have basic security, they haven't got time to play with this stuff. They haven't got time to be nice to each other.
Yeah, just let me add something to your comment. Is that, for example, again, talking about the Banco Palmas case, it was interesting to see them when we did research in the field there. So for very poor people, so how to adopt a digital platform was important in terms of security, because if they walk on the streets with cash in their pockets in a place that's not safe, they can be under attack by robbers and things like that. So one first issue for these very poor people to adopt a digital platform is security, which is something that's not usual for in the discussions of community currencies in Europe, for example. So, but I'd like to share this idea with you, because this, even for the very poor people, it's this adoption of digital platforms could help them to see community currencies as a very important option for them also.
Just to add, in his presentation, Professor Guy Standing showed a film of the experiment they did in an African community where they had so many villages got the basic income, and they had control studies, and it was charity money, UNESCO. They gave them, everybody in these villages, 200 rupees a month, which isn't much. But this, and they got them all bank accounts. The money went straight in their bank, and then nobody asked what they could spend it on, and the results were very interesting, that it freed them up. They sent their children to school, girls got educated, they invested in businesses, and it was very impressive. But what I'm saying is it's this dual thing we need to take care of, you know, complementary to what?
I totally agree with you.
I suppose it's right now the time to go to the last presenter. So thank you very much, Edward, for your presentation and answers. The last,